and there is 3 points on the upside and there is a 10% chance that it will fall through and there is 9 points on the downside, then that's 90 cents off of $2.70, leaving $1.80 mathematical expectation. Next, said Buffett, you have to figure in the time spent involved and then relate the return of the investment to other investments available to you. If you bought one share of Abbott Company at $27, there is, according to Buffett's mathematics, a potential 6.6% return, $1.80/$27. If the deal is expected to close in 6 months, the annualized return on the investment would be 13.2%. Buffett would then compare the return from this risk arbitrage with other returns available to him. Buffett freely acknowledges that risk arbitrage carries the potential for loss. We are perfectly willing to lose money on a given transaction, he said, arbitrage being one example, but we are not willing to enter into any transaction in which we think the probability of a number of mutually independent events of similar type has an expectancy of loss. We hope, he added, that we re-entering into transactions where our calculations of those probabilities have validity. We can see quite clearly that Buffett's risk arbitrage estimates are subjective probabilities. There is no frequency distribution in risk arbitrage. Every deal is different. Every circumstance requires different estimations. Even so, there is value to approaching the risk arbitrage deal with some rational mathematical calculation. The process, we shall learn, is no different when you invest in common stocks. Kelly optimization. Each time you step foot inside a casino, the probability of coming out a winner is pretty low. You shouldn't be surprised, after all, we all know the house has the best odds. But one game, if played correctly, gives you a legitimate chance to beat the house, blackjack. In a worldwide bestseller called Beat the Dealer, a winning strategy for the game of 21, Edward O. Thorpe, a mathematician by training, outlined a process for outsmarting the casino. Thorpe's strategy was based on a simple concept. When the deck is rich with tens, face cards, and aces, the player, let's say it SU, has a statistical advantage over the dealer. If you assign A1 for the high cards and A+1 for the low cards, it's quite easy to keep track of the cards dealt. Just keep a running tally in your head, adding and subtracting as each card shows. When the count turns positive, you know there are more high cards yet to be played. Smart players save their biggest bets for when the card count reaches a higher relative number. Buried deep inside Thorpe's book was a notation on the Kelly betting model. 18 Kelly, in turn, took his inspiration from Claude Shannon, the inventor of information theory. A mathematician with Bell Laboratories in the 1940s, Shannon spent a good deal of his career trying to find the most optimal way to transmit information over copper lines without having the information become garbled by random molecular noise. In 1948, in an article called A Mathematical Theory of Communication, he described what he had discovered. Included in the article was the mathematical formula for the optimal amount of information that, considering the possibility of success, can be pushed through a copper wire. A few years later, J. L. Kelly, another mathematician, read Shannon's article and realized the formula could just as easily work in gambling, another human endeavor that would be enhanced by knowing the possibilities of success. In 1956, in a paper titled A New Interpretation of Information Rate, Kelly pointed out that Shannon's various transmission rates and possible outcomes of a chance event are essentially the same thing. Probabilities in the same formula could optimize both. The Kelly optimization model, often called the optimal growth strategy, is based on the concept that if you know the probability of success, you bet the fraction of your bankroll that maximizes the growth rate. It is expressed as a formula: 2p 1 equals x, where 2 times the probability of winning, p minus 1 equals the percentage of your total bankroll that you should bet, x. For example, if the probability of beating the house is 55%, you should bet 10% of your bankroll to achieve maximum growth of your winnings. If the probability is 70%, bet 40%. And if you know the odds of winning are 100%, the model would say, bet it all. The stock market, of course, is far more complex than the game of blackjack. In a card game, there are a finite number of cards and therefore a limited number of possible outcomes. The stock market, with many thousands of stocks and millions of investors, has an almost unlimited number of various outcomes. Using the Kelly approach requires constant recalculations and adjustments throughout the investment process. Nonetheless, the underlying concept mathematically linking the degree of probability to investment size carries important lessons. I believe the Kelly model is an attractive tool for focused investors. However, it will benefit only those who use it responsibly. There are risks to employing the Kelly approach, and investors would be wise to understand its 3 limitations. 1. Anyone who intends to invest, using the Kelly model or not, should have a long-term horizon. Even if a blackjack player has a sound model that can beat the house, it does not always hold that success will be revealed in the first few hands dealt. The same is true for investing. How many times have investors seen that they have selected the right company but the market has taken its own sweet time in rewarding the selection? 2. Be wary of using leverage. The danger of borrowing to invest in the stock market, with a margin account, has been trumpeted loudly by both Ben Graham and Warren Buffett. The unexpected call on your capital can occur at the most unfortunate time in the game. If you use the Kelly model and a margin account, a stock market decline can force you to sell your stock, causing you to remove a high probability bet. 3. The biggest danger in playing high probability games is the risk of overbidding. If you judge that an event has a 70% chance of success when in fact it is only a 55% event, you run the risk of so-called gambler's ruin. The way to minimize that risk is to underbid, by using what is known as a half Kelly or a fractional Kelly model. For example, if the Kelly model would tell you to bet 10% of your capital, you might choose to bet only 5%, half Kelly, instead. Both the half Kelly bet and the fractional Kelly bet provide a margin of safety in portfolio management, that, together with the margin of safety we apply to selecting individual stocks, provides a double layer of protection. Because the risk of overbetting far outweighs the penalties of underbetting, I believe that all investors, especially those who are just beginning to use a focused investment strategy, should use fractional Kelly bets. Unfortunately, minimizing your bets also minimizes your potential gain. However, because the relationship in the Kelly model is parabolic, the penalty for underbidding is not severe. A half Kelly bet, which reduces the amount you bet by 50%, reduces the potential growth rate by 25%. Munger on betting odds. In 1994, Charlie Munger accepted an invitation from Dr. Guilford Babcock to address the Student Investment Seminar at the University of Southern California's Business School. He touched on several topics, including the art of achieving worldly wisdom. He also explained, as only he can, what he thinks about probabilities and optimization. The model I like to sort of simplify the notion of what goes on in a market for common stocks is the parimutuel system at the racetrack, he said. If you stop and think about it, a parimutuel system is a market. Everybody goes there and bets and the odds are changed based on what's bet. That has what happens in the stock market. He continued, any damn fool can see that a horse carrying a lightweight with a wonderful win rate and good position etc. is way more likely to win than a horse with a terrible record and extra weight and so on and so on. But if you look at the odds, the bad horse pays 100 to 1, whereas the good horse pays 3 to 2. Then it's not clear which is statistically the best bet. The prices have changed in such a way that it's very hard to beat the system. Charlie's racetrack analogy is perfect for investors. Too often, investors are attracted to a long shot that pays incredible odds but, for any one of countless reasons, never finishes the race. Or sometimes they pick the sure thing without ever considering the payoff. It appears to me that the most sensible way to approach horse racing, or the stock market, is to wait until the good horse comes to the post with inviting odds. The element of psychology. Andrew Bayer, the author of several books on thoroughbred racing, has spent many years watching racegoers bet and has seen far too many lose money through impetuosity. At the racetrack, as elsewhere, the casino mentality, the itch to get into the action, to put down the money, toss the dice, pull the lever, Do something compels people to bet foolishly, without taking the time to think through what they are doing. Baer, who understands the psychological urge to get into the game, advises players to accommodate it by dividing their strategy between action bets and prime bets. Prime bets are reserved for serious players when two conditions occur: 1. Confidence in the horse's ability to win is high, and 2. Payoff odds are greater than they should be. Prime bets call for serious money. Action bets, as the name implies, are reserved for the long shots and hunches that satisfy the psychological need to play. They are smaller bets and never are allowed to become a large part of the player's betting pool. When a horse player starts blurring the distinction between prime bets and action bets, says Baer, he or she is taking a step that will inevitably lead toward helter-skelter betting with no proper balance between strong and weak selections. From theory to reality. Now, let us move away from the racetrack and put all this theory together into the reality of the stock market. The chain of thinking is the same. 1. Calculate probabilities. This is the probability you are concerned with. What are the chances that this stock I am considering will, over time, achieve an economic return greater than the stock market? 2. Wait for the best odds. The odds of success tip in your favor when you have a margin of safety. The more uncertain the situation, the greater the margin you need. In the stock market, the margin of safety is provided by a discounted price. When the company you like is selling at a price that is below its intrinsic value, that is your signal to act. 3. Adjust for new information. Knowing that you are going to wait until the odds turn in your favor, pay scrupulous attention in the meantime to whatever the company does. Has management begun to act irresponsibly? Have the financial decisions begun to change? Has something happened to alter the competitive landscape in which the business operates? If so, the probabilities will likely change. 4. Decide how much to invest. Of all the money you have available for investing in the market, what proportion should go into a particular purchase? Start with the Kelly formula, then adjust downward, perhaps to a half Kelly bet or a fractional Kelly bet. Thinking about probabilities may be new to you, but it is not impossible to learn how to use them. If you are able to teach yourself to think about stocks this way, you are well on your way to being able to profit from your own lessons. Recall Buffett's purchase of the Coca-Cola Company in 1988. He invested 1/3 of Berkshire's portfolio in the company. Coca-Cola was an outstanding business with above-average economics, selling at a price substantially below intrinsic value. Opportunities like this do not often occur in the stock market. But when one does occur, those who understand probabilities will recognize it and will know what to do. As Charlie Munger puts it, the wise investors bet heavily when the world offers them that opportunity. They bet big when they have the odds. And the rest of the time, they don't. It's just that simple. Focus investors in Graham and Doddsville. In 1934, during the height of the Great Depression, a remarkable book with the unremarkable title of Security Analysis was published. Its co-authors, Benjamin Graham and David Dodd, had been working on it for 5 years. Their writing time had been interrupted by teaching at Columbia University and helping clients cope with the after effects of the 1929 crash. Graham later said the delay was providential, for it allowed him to include wisdom acquired at the cost of much suffering. Security Analysis is universally acclaimed as a classic. It is still in print after 5 editions and 80 years. It is impossible to overstate its influence on the modern world of investing. 50 years after the original publication, the Columbia University Business School sponsored a seminar marking the anniversary. Warren Buffett, one of the school's best-known alumni and the most famous modern-day proponent of Graham's value approach, was invited to address the gathering. His speech, titled The Super Investors of Graham and Doddsville, has become, in its own way, as much a classic as the book it honored. Most in the audience that day in 1984 university professors, researchers, and other academicians still held firmly to modern portfolio theory and the validity of the efficient market hypothesis. Buffett, to no one's surprise, firmly disagreed, and in his speech he quietly demolished the platform on which rested the efficient market theory. He began by recapping the central argument of modern portfolio theory that the stock market is efficient, all stocks are priced correctly, and therefore anyone who beats the market year after year is simply lucky. Maybe so, he said, but I know some folks who have done it, and their success can't be explained away as simply random chance. And he proceeded to lay out the evidence. All the examples he presented that day were of people who had managed to beat the market over time, and who had done so not because of luck but because they followed principles learned from the same source. Ben Graham. They all reside, he said, in the intellectual village of Graham in Doddsville. Although they may make specific decisions differently, Buffett explained, they are linked by a common approach that seeks to take advantage of discrepancies between the market price and intrinsic value. Needless to say, our Graham and Dodd investors do not discuss beta, the capital asset pricing model or covariance of returns, Buffett said. These are not subjects of any interest to them. In fact, most of them would have trouble defining those terms. In a published article based on his 1984 speech, Buffett included tables that presented the impressive performance results of the residents of Graham and Doddsville. 26 But it was not just the Graham approach to value investing that united these great investors. Each of these great investors, Charlie Munger, Bill Irwin, and Lou Simpson, also managed focused portfolios just like Buffett did. From their performance records there is much we can learn. But before we start this investigation, let us begin with the very first focus investor. John Maynard Keynes. Most people recognize John Maynard Keynes for his contributions to economic theory. Few know that he was also a legendary investor. Proof of his investment prowess can be found in the performance record of the Chest Fund at King's College in Cambridge, England. Before 1920, King's College investments were restricted to fixed income securities. When Keynes was appointed the second bursar in late 1919, he persuaded the trustees to begin a separate fund that would contain only common stocks, currency, and commodity futures. This separate account became the Chest Fund. From 1927, when he was named first bursar, until his death in 1945, Keynes had sole responsibility for this account. In all that time, he kept its holdings focused on just a few companies. In 1934, the same year that Security Analysis was published, Keynes wrote to a colleague, explaining his reasoning. It is a mistake to think one limits one's risk by spreading too much between enterprises which one knows little and has no reason for special confidence. One's knowledge and experience are definitely limited, and there are seldom more than 2 or 3 enterprises at any given time in which I personally feel myself entitled to put full confidence. 4 years later, Keynes prepared a full policy report for the Chest Fund, outlining his principles. 1. A careful selection of a few investments having regard to their cheapness in relation to their probable actual and potential intrinsic, emphasis his, value over a period of years ahead and in relation to alternative investments at the time. 2. A steadfast holding of these fairly large units through thick and thin, perhaps several years, until either they have fulfilled their promise or it is evident that they were purchased on a mistake. 3. A balanced, emphasis his, investment position, that is, a variety of risks in spite of individual holdings being large, and if possible opposed risks. Although he did not use the term, I believe it is clear from Keynes's investment policy that he was a focused investor. He purposely limited his stocks to a select few and relied on fundamental analysis to estimate the value of his picks relative to their price. He liked to keep portfolio turnover at a very low rate. And he aimed to include opposed risks by introducing a variety of economic positions concentrated in high-quality, predictable businesses. How well did Keynes perform? During his 18-year stewardship, the Chest Fund achieved an average annual return of 13.2%, at a time when the overall UK market remained basically flat. Considering that the time period included both the Great